Welcome to this presentation on planning the transition to ISO 9001-2015 and IATF 16949-2016, including a summary of the major changes. My name is Paul Hardiman, Director of Quality Partner. I've been working with quality management systems for 25 years and I'm an IATF witness auditor and trainer. So we're going to use the Plan, Do, Check, Act approach to looking at this transition process. So firstly, let's start with planning. So what does an organisation need to do in the planning to make a successful transition? The first thing clearly involves the involvement of top management. Top management need to clearly define the organisation's strategic direction. They need to go back and revisit the quality policy, and they need to make sure that they've defined measurable quality objectives that relate to both effectiveness and efficiency. The second thing that they need to do is take into account the needs of all interested parties. Whereas ISO TS 16949 talked mainly about the customer, what we see in the new IATF 16949 is the need to take into account not just the customer, but make sure that the quality management system meets the needs of all interested parties. So that could be regulators involved within the automotive industry, it could be the local community, it could be employees within the organisation, or it could be suppliers. But it's important that the quality management system takes into account the needs of all those relevant interested parties. The next thing that we need to understand is the changes. We need to understand the changes in ISO 9001-2015 and the changes in IATF 16949-2016. One of the fundamental changes that we see driven by ISO 9001-2015 and also reflected in IATF 16949-2016 is within each of the organisation quality management system processes that we understand the risks within those processes, and also we understand the opportunities within the processes. So these are some of the things that we need to think about in planning the transition. So let's now run through a summary of some of the main changes within IATF 16949-2016. The first thing that we see is far more focus upon the organisation understanding product safety requirements and managing them within the product realisation process. Now, within the scope of the IATF scheme, our organisations are supplying product that will go into a car, a bus, a truck or a motorcycle. And all of these products, obviously within the products, have safety critical items. So what IATF is saying is that we really need to focus on how those requirements are managed within the quality management system. So this may be the organisation has to step back and take a fresh look at how they're managing product safety and how they manage the integrity of that through their manufacturing and product realisation processes. The second big change is about contingency planning. Now, contingency planning has always been a requirement within the automotive certification scheme. This is a document that looks at the potential things that could go wrong in supplying to the customer and making sure there are effective contingencies in place. I think what IATF have found that even though an organisation has got a contingency plan, they still see production disruptions caused by organisations within the automotive supply chain. So I think this is a chance for organisations to go back to their contingency plan and make sure that it is a live document, is developed by a multidisciplinary team, and the contingency plan supports 100% on-time delivery to the customer. The next point is about the role of top management. Now, we can see within the ISO 9001-2015 model that top management are at the centre of the model, and it doesn't just talk about top management, but it talks about their role and their role in terms of leadership. So really now there is no escaping from top management. Top management can't anymore just delegate the responsibility for the quality management system to the quality manager. They have to take responsibility themselves to lead, making sure that they have an effective process-based management system and that the risks and opportunities within each of the business processes are understood. One of the other big changes is about the supplier management and selection process. Now there is more stringent requirements about supplier selection and supplier monitoring, especially understanding the risks within the automotive supply chain. So it is not saying that we cannot have single source supply, but for example, single source supply is a risk. And IATF want to know how are organisations managing that risk within their organisation. And whereas in ISO TS 16949, we saw a lot of focus on suppliers of production parts, now we don't just see production parts, but we see the emphasis on supplier selection and management for the management of outsourced processes, but we also see how are they managing service suppliers, because service suppliers can have a big effect on the organisation's effectiveness in delivering to meet the customer requirements. The next big change is related to maintenance. Now again, as a fundamental part of automotive quality management system, maintenance has always been a strong requirement. But in the publication of IATF 16949, we see far more emphasis on maintenance and developing a total productive maintenance system that is capable of supporting on-time delivery to the customer. So this is a requirement that your maintenance department will have to study and understand, not just have a paperwork-driven maintenance system, but it is really effective in maintaining all the production equipment within the organisation that is needed to meet the customer requirements. The next thing that we see is more stringent requirements related to the use of rework, and also understanding all the risks in rework before rework commences. So we have now detailed requirements about rework and repair within the new IATF standard. The next thing that we need to understand is about internal and second-party auditor competency. In the previous version of ISO TS 16949, there were requirements, but they were not prescriptive. Now what we see in the new IATF 16949 is much clearer requirements for internal auditor competency and a completely new section about the competency of auditors that are capable of going out and doing second-party audits. This doesn't mean that you have to start from a clean sheet of paper. It means that you can build up on the experience of the people currently involved in internal and second-party audits. The next change I want to mention is about the organisation process to retain knowledge. This is one of the fundamental changes in ISO 9001-2015, which requires that the organisation decide how are they going to retain within the organisation the necessary knowledge to operate its processes. That knowledge can be retained by having more than one person that can perform each of the tasks within the organisations and being able to reflect that maybe within skill matrix, or having documents, for example standardised work or work instructions that specify how specific tasks should be undertook. Now in my working life I can think of lots of examples where maybe a key person has left the organisation and that has caused internal problems, maybe for example in progressing a customer sales order. If the key person who did that leaves the organisation, they leave on the Friday, on the Monday when a new person has to perform that task, how do they perform it? Is it because they've been trained how to do it, or is there very detailed work instructions for how to perform that task? So an organisation has to think about the risk, not just of the people currently working within the organisation, but the consequences of people leaving the organisation. And knowledge is a changing feat. We have to think that as we develop new products and processes, that we need to decide what knowledge do we need and how we're going to retain that knowledge. So I think this is one of the fundamental changes. The next thing, let's move into production. Most of you in your production processes will use error-proofing devices. Now we see in IATF 16949 more stringent requirements about how we verify these error-proofing devices to make sure they are still capable of detecting whether a part is good or no good. So for example, we need to calibrate or verify the masters, or sometimes these masters are called rabbits, that periodically we put within the process to check that the error-proofing devices are working. These controls need to be formalized within the quality management system. Next, one of the big changes in IATF is about temporary process change. Maybe because something in a process fails, for example, we may have an automatic camera detection system. If that fails and we need to revert back to a manual inspection process, we need to demonstrate that we have good management of those temporary changes. Because I think IATF feel that these temporary changes are often the source of non-conforming product. So we need to make sure that there are instructions to say how these temporary changes are managed, and these instructions are linked back to the production control plan. The next thing is about warranty management. Now I know not all of your organisations will have an agreement to provide a warranty management process for your customers. In that case, this requirement would not be applicable, but you cannot exclude it from the scope of the quality management system. For those of you that warranty is part of the customer agreement, you need to develop an effective warranty management process and formalise that within the scope of the quality management system. So once within the planning phase, we understand some of the key changes in ISO 9001-2015 and in IATF 16949-2016, we now have to go into the do phase, which is implementing the changes required. So we need to implement the changes and we need to communicate the relevant changes to all employees within the organisation. Within the planning phase, we would have identified risks and opportunities. What we need to do in the doing phase is demonstrate how are we managing those risks and opportunities, and particularly how are we maximising the benefit from the opportunities that we've developed. Now let's move then into the check phase. Now what we need to do is to check that all the changes that we've been identified and we've implemented have been implemented effectively. So a key thing that we need to do is to really use our internal audit system, using our newly qualified auditors, both in ISO 9001-2015 and in IATF 16949-2016. So this means implementing the audit system to audit the quality management system processes and to implement the products within the scope of the quality management system. The next thing that we need to do is to make sure that we undertake a management review to ensure that we've not just defined the organisation's strategic direction, we've not just defined the quality policy, and we've not just defined the quality objectives, but we are meeting the organisation's strategic direction, we're meeting the intent of the quality policy, and importantly, we're meeting the quality objectives related to effectiveness and efficiency. And this is one of the key functions of management review, to make sure that we have implemented a robust system to meet the change requirements and that it is delivering effectiveness and efficiency. We also need to make sure that we continue to meet all customer requirements, and this will also include a review of any relevant customer scorecards, and that we're meeting the requirements of relevant interested parties. And finally then, let's have a look at the act phase. This act phase is really there to drive continual improvement within the organisation. Now, as management, you will set objectives for effectiveness and efficiency, But in the real life, we won't always be meeting those objectives. So what we need to demonstrate is that we take effective action when the objectives are not met. So this means providing documented evidence that we are taking effective corrective action to make sure that we will meet the objectives that are defined. The next thing is, as part of continual improvement, is to pursue the opportunities that we identified in our risk and opportunity identification. And we are really driving effectiveness and efficiency within the scope of the quality management system. The next thing is, risk and opportunity will change. Organisations change. We go into new markets, we get into new customers, we introduce new products, we introduce new processes. As part of ACT, we need to make sure that we are continually looking at how these changes affect risk and opportunities. And as part of the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, we are updating our risk and opportunities and building any necessary controls within the quality management system to make sure that the customer and the interested party requirements are met. So let's summarise then. I think the fundamental change both within ISO 9001-2015 and IATF 16949-2016 is risk-based thinking. I feel that this is one of the biggest changes within the quality management systems that have been issued. One of the key requirements for management is to understand what risk-based thinking means and promote risk-based thinking throughout the organisation. So although we've been through many detailed changes within this presentation, please take that message away at the end of this, that risk and opportunity is the key change. And let's look at that as a really positive opportunity to try and make our organisations better, to make sure that we can continue to supply the customer and we improve internal efficiency. Let's not just do it as a paperwork exercise. I would really encourage you to study and understand the changes in ISO 9001-2015 and IATF 16949-2016. I stress again that we have to read both these documents together. We can't just read IATF 16949-2016 without understanding the fundamental requirements within the ISO 9001 standard.